Hi everyone. Now you may be wondering why I'm wearing white gloves. I'll explain. A few days ago, a package arrived, delivered to my house, which I opened up, and inside was a book. This book, which actually weighs the same as a small horse. As soon as I saw it, I realized that it was so beautifully printed and so pristine that it almost demands to be read whilst wearing white gloves. The book's title is NASA, Past and Present Dreams of the Future, and I'm delighted that its creator is joining us now to tell us about how he made it. He is Benedict Redgrove. Benedict, welcome to In Conversation.
Thank you for having me, Alastair.
You'll forgive me if I put the book down.
That's fairly heavy.
Benedict, firstly, congratulations on producing a truly exceptional book. What kind of feedback have you had from the people at NASA?
It's been interesting, actually. I've had a sort of cross-section of feedback from people that have bought it, and then obviously from the people at NASA, that because it's not a commission directly from them, it's my own project. They can't be seen to endorsing anything publicly or anything. So the comments I get tend to be via email or telephone calls, it's all positive. I haven't had anything negative at all there. The nicest ones are from engineers when they say, we've been working with these things for years and years and years, and you're finally showing it in the way that we see it every day, that's quite a compliment, I think.
Wonderful, great. Well, we'll get on to the book, but let's just talk a little bit about who you are, Benedict. You're a British photographer, a filmmaker, a graphic designer, and you've had a lifetime obsession with NASA and space exploration. But before we get on to that, tell us about how you got into photography in the first place. And was it an obvious choice of career for you?
It's a long, sort of slightly convoluted route, I'd say. I'd loved photography when I was a child. I bought my first camera from my dad when I was 8, and then I always had this interest. Sorry?
He wouldn't give it to you?
No, he wouldn't.
You're a Scotsman?
Burn it. Yeah, it was a little small Kodak box. It was just black and grey with a little metal push button for the shutter and these small cartridges that you put in the back, which you then send off and get your double set back. I was at school, loved photography, but then when I went to art college, I did a foundation course, got onto a graphics design course for my BA, but didn't do that, went straight into work for graphic design agencies. And while I was doing that, the weekend I was photographing, and I found the photography side was much more interesting than the graphic side. And as much as I enjoy design, and I really, I love design, I designed the book and lots of other things, but it was the photography that really took over. And so I wanted to push that. So I started shooting sports events and news stories. Actually, that was the thing I wanted to do. I really wanted to be that sort of grand reportage photographer, heading off into the wilds, into the war zones and everywhere else.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of the start of it. And it sort of went off from there around different paths, really.
But you didn't think of sticking with the news side of photography?
I did for quite a while. I was really pushing for stories, and I like to sort of try and tell stories through the work, even though it might not seem like that so much in the NASA book, but I think there's a narrative in the way that the imagery is set out. But I did for a long time. I was going to go down that route, and then I met a Magnum photographer at folio viewing, where we were going to see a magazine, and we were both waiting outside, and we got chatting, and we said, let's just swap books. So we swapped folios. He looked at mine, I looked at his. He looked at mine, thinking, oh, this is quite cool. There's a lot of car stuff in here and various bits and pieces. And I looked at his, and as the more I went through it, the more harrowing it was. And I realized this is I don't think I've got the makeup to cope with those situations. It was really tough. And he had that slightly harsh look in his eye that you see, Don McCullin talks about it really well, actually, that, that using the camera as a filter, but even that, you can't take away the smells, you can't take away the sounds, you can't take away the experiences. They're always going to be there, and I think it wears you down after a while, and I don't think I have that mental and emotional capacity to deal with those events.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think I'd say you probably made the right choice. I mean, a lot of the people I know or have known, because some of them are dead now, but the people I've known who've done that, gone down that road, have they have a strange look in their eyes, and they're sort of slightly tangential to everything else that's going on. So I think it's only certain people are really made to do that kind of work. But I admire them to do it.
I think, I mean, there were a couple of situations later on in life where that I sort of experienced a few moments of those kind of things happening. You know, a lot of death and surrounded by it and seeing it, and I think that really cemented that I knew I'd done the right thing. I knew I couldn't really face it. So I think I, like you say, chosen the right path. And also it's something that I think I can really put my own mark on. You know, I think a lot of people get into photography and they feel like they need to do one thing. They need to be a fashion photographer, or they have to shoot sport, or they have to shoot whatever it is. And it's more of that's what I should be doing, rather than that's what I want to do. And there are so many photographers now, all shooting various things. Half of them probably not very happy because they're not achieving what they want to achieve, because they're probably not doing the right kind. They're probably not shooting the right subject for them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that ever sets you apart from another photographer is the way you see that subject, and then the way you treat that work. And if it's not from your heart, if it's not something you believe in, then I think it shows all the time. You know, it shows in weak work or copied work, or assimilated from somebody else's style. So I think what I do now is definitely something I believe in. The work is based on that as well. It's based on having something to believe in. You know, the whole NASA program was something that, when I was a child growing up, that was my that was the pinnacle of everything, you know, and everything they did, everything they stood for, I just admired and thought, this is it. You know, it was one of those things, if someone said, I work for NASA, you'd be like, oh my God, that is, you are the top, you are the pinnacle of your job. Yeah. And I think it needs to be, when I'm working, I try and push my limits as high as I can, and I always try and make sure that what I'm doing is something that resonates with me, because I can't expect other people to look at the work and enjoy it if I'm not enjoying it or feeling it. Sure,
absolutely. Well, you certainly found your own voice with NASA, for sure. But when you're not working on your personal projects like the NASA book, you are, I can describe you as a commercial photographer, and shooting advertising campaigns for clients like BMW and Audi and Aston Martin and British Airways. So I feel there's a theme emerging here, Benedict, a fascination with machinery and technology. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's I've always loved sci-fi, and I've always loved technology and engineering, and all of those things combined. I think the sort of engineering and good design theory, you know, where something has to perform a function, and so it should perform that function perfectly, or as well as it can, and the design of it shouldn't get in the way of that function. It should, you know, it should help it, and then the form follows that function. So to me, once those things are achieved, then I'm sort of all on board really with whatever it is. But when I find things that aren't that well designed, or their functionality doesn't work so well, I find it repellent, to be honest with you. So
you just brought to mind the old the lemon squeezer, the Philip Stark.
Yes,
that's a classic example of function following forms, or no function following forms.
Yeah, I mean, that's Philip Stark, right? And that was that is a really awful piece of design. You know, it's terrible. It's this hey, we've made this thing look the way it does, and actually it doesn't do it at all well. Yeah, I'm not. I think anything like that is just a massive failure, isn't it? Really, you can't describe it as anything else. It, I mean, it looks the way it looks, but it's a total failure in its functionality.
Yeah, yeah. Well, your work has a particularly an easily recognizable style. I would say. How would you describe the style of your photography?
It's very clean. It's very minimalist, yeah, clean, graphic. I think it's really heavily composed. To the point that, you know, what you're looking at should not have anything superfluous around it. So even in my advertising campaigns, I always try and sort of remove and take away. There's nothing in there that you know, should detract from the main subject, and I think that's probably why commercially my work is sort of chosen by a lot of people, because I can make the object look nice, but also there's a theory behind why it's where it is. And in my personal work, I try and keep that the same thing. It either goes from very, very simple, very clean, and nothing else in there, to extremely busy. But when it's extremely busy, there's still a sort of a method to the madness almost. There are some shots I did of a Paranal observatory in the Atacama Desert, and we were photographing different sections of these telescopes, and there's just cables and everything you can think of that looks like some sort of cyborg. But I loved that complex nature of it, knowing that everything in that picture was doing something. There wasn't a sort of, you know, randomness to it. It was organized chaos, and I'm sort of, I think I like extremes. I think that's probably where it comes from.
But I know I noticed it's interesting what you just said. I noticed that when you have people in your photos, which is rare, I would say, they often appear quite robotic, almost subservient to the machines.
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think yes. Oh, there you go. There's a prime example. So the way I look at composition is everything is there for its reason, but nothing's more important than the next, right? Unless it really needs to be, and so I'll sort of rearrange it. But the guy is, you know, the pilot there as a Rafale pilot, and the plane's important. He's important. I think I've started shooting a lot more people recently, the last few years actually. Before, I had nothing really in my book. Ironically, when I started, that's what I shot, was portraits. And then I remember shooting. I was on a fashion shoot, and I asked the model to move a little bit more to the right, a little bit more to the right, a little bit more to the right. I thought, yeah, it's perfect now, she's not in the shot. So I was like, well, maybe there's a sign that I shouldn't be doing this and I should be doing something else. So that's, yeah, I think they are, you're right in that they become part of the construction, part of the composition. And I think that's where good portrait photographers work, I guess, you know, in that they have a relationship with the person, and that's able to come out. Whereas I'm looking at the person, there's another object that's in the frame, and so they're there to organize the composition, to direct your eye, and maybe sort of tell some of the story.
Well, yeah, or I was going to add that maybe it's because you want to control everything, and when you have people, the people are harder to control. They don't always do what you tell them, you know.
Yeah, true. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Whereas with machinery, you could be very precise, and it'll just stay where you put it. Because people tend to wander around and talk back to you. Yeah,
they do.
Mean, it's not criticism; it's just an observation. But anyway, Benedict, this week is we're celebrating Space Week here on Viking.TV, and as I said to you earlier, you have a love of space and science fiction. Tell us about the beginnings of that. Was there a kickoff point for where you, as a child, you thought, sci-fi, love it?
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching black and white editions of Flash Gordon, and basically anything sci-fi was on TV. I think it was a chance for me to escape. There was this other world, and it looked fascinating and exciting, and they had these incredible costumes and guns and spaceships. And I used to love all of that stuff. And so I think that I had this just this chance to escape, and I think that grew and grew and grew. And so the more as the sort of 70s developed, there were some really exciting sci-fi programs that were going on, and that's probably where this white world has started from, because programs like Space 1999, and they had all these incredible bases and these incredible costumes, and then it's sort of developed into a bit more of a higher area when I sort of saw Kubrick films, and you suddenly realize that there's this very strong sense of composition and cleanliness, and there's a way of describing something with less. He was a master of using less to show. Right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think Kubrick, you're referring to 2001: Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
Which, I saw it not long ago, and it still looks fresh. It hasn't dated at all. And I think also it contains, for me, one of the scariest moments in cinema, which is when the two astronauts are talking and they think Hal, the computer, can't hear them. Yes. But Hal is lip reading, and that's. I'm getting goosebumps just mentioning it now, and people who've seen the film will definitely remember that. It's a great film.
And how relevant is that now, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone listening in, that is so relevant. Where you've got the Amazon Echo or whatever else that's sort of sitting there. Then the moment you finish your conversation, up comes the ad.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And then there's there's also I think that what I love about is that sort of clean minimalism of those things, and films like Solaris as well, where you have this, that takes it to an even another level, because then it plays with the sound and the script, where there's literally nothing happening, and you've just got the sound, the sort of sound of the ship inside, and that Moon did that a very good job of actually. That they sort of did that really nicely at the beginning of Moon, and I think it's that ability to say a lot by doing very little or having very little is a very powerful tool, and you have to play it very carefully, I think.
Yeah. Which brings us nicely to your book, which is what we're really going to discuss tonight. NASA, Past and Present Dreams of the Future. I thought a good way we could introduce it would be by showing the short video that you made for your Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah.
But before we show it, just tell me, I know what Kickstarter is, but just tell me, how does it work, and what kind of response did you get back from that campaign?
Kickstarter, for anyone that doesn't really know what it is, if you have an idea and you want to produce something, and you need to raise funds to do that, you can either show the idea in whichever form it is, whether it's a set of diagrams or you've actually made a production piece, and then you basically put together a business plan and present it to the world through the Kickstarter website, and that you then set a target of how much you need to raise, and you set different pledge levels, and then you spend the next 30 days working really hard to sort of answer people's questions and try and get the budget raised up.
Right. Yeah, great. Well, let's have a look at the little promo which will introduce the book. So, Benedict, the book neatly coincides with the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing, which I'm just old enough to remember watching. It's 200 images, 9 years in the making, and 5 of those years were spent negotiating with NASA to get access. So how frustrating was that process?
I think it's such a long process for various reasons. So you have to, you know, NASA are in the business of exploring space, and that's what they do. And they must have, I don't know how many thousands of photographers and people wanting to come along and take pictures of all the exciting areas. So you need to put a good sort of point of why you're doing this, how you're doing it, and where it's going to be seen, for them to invest their time of taking you around and showing you all these different places. So it took a little bit of time for me to get that together, and then it took time to speak to the right people, and then the people you'd spoken to had left and gone to another department, so then you had to start the conversation again. And eventually it sort of moved up the NASA ladder until I eventually started speaking to sort of higher people. They would say yes. They would then set a new set of parameters, which I then had to go and fulfill. And it took a long time. And it wasn't until eventually we got to the point where I spoke to a contact I've got at Wired magazine, Wired UK, and they agreed to sort of help me with get access. It's down to them in a lot of ways that this sort of started to come together. And then it was another 2 years after that happened that we eventually got there and took the first picture inside the International Space Station trainer. So I remember setting that shot up, turning to my assistant going, this is the longest pre-production I've ever had, 5 years to take this one shot. Yeah, it was good though. I mean, it's definitely a lesson in determination and self-belief. And if you want to do something, then it's not a question of being sort of dogged and just saying, no, I'm going to do it. You've got to think of around these issues. Yeah, it's a long process, but one that I've had to redo at each stage of this whole project.
Well, because I was wondering whether it was a case of once you're in the front door, that you're in sort of thing. But did you have to then, now I want to photograph this, and now I want to.
Yeah,
you have to keep
it's definitely that. So you're into the first bit. So we did the first set of shots, and then I had to plan the next set, and I made sure that I spoke to my contact there saying, this is what I'd like to do next. You basically get given an amount of time that you are allowed in the areas you are allowed, and you need to tell them which areas you need to go in.
Right.
So it's a long time planning each section, and then it's a long time when you fly home, then you need to replan, and then dates change because obviously people might be training. So when we were shooting inside the space station trainer, at one point we had to leave because they were training some astronauts how to photograph in space, which I volunteered for, but strangely enough didn't do. Yeah, always, things were always moving around, and that's not a blame. That's just the way it all works. So it was a question of once you've done one thing, then you need to replan for the next. And then if you're going to a different base, there's various locations, then you need to speak to the new person at the new location and start that relationship up with them. But there's a sort of grapevine. So if if you're good and they like you and they know how you work and they know you're not trouble and you're not going to try and walk off with a moon rock or something, then they'll they'll invite you back, which was luckily enough for me. They did that.
Yeah, well, having been granted access to NASA, you then spent 4 years on the photography, and I think the photos are beautiful. The way the subject matter is isolated from its surroundings and shot with ultra high definition camera, which gives a maximum of detail. What kind of cameras were you using?
So there were 3 actually. So when I first started the project, I shot. So that shot there is of one called an Alpa, and you can just see on the laptop screen that there's you're looking at the top left-hand corner of that object.
Yeah.
which is the Boeing Starliner before it's got its lovely white slick casing on it. And the way that camera works is, if you see that that's the top left corner, then there will be a bottom left corner, a top right corner, and a bottom right corner. And so to make up one image, you end up shooting these different quadrants, and then you stitch the image together, and so you end up with a very high resolution image. So that one I shot I would say probably just over half the project was shot on that camera. The very early part was shot on a Hasselblad 503, which is the a sort of post version of the one they used on the moon or lunar cameras. And then after that, I used a Phase 1 XF IQ3, which is a sort of high resolution medium format camera, similar back, just slightly higher resolution. There's the XY when I was shooting one of the Robonauts inside the robot area,
right,
at Houston. Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Because I've spent most of my life as a photographer, and I've used Hasselblads a lot. I know about the other camera you mentioned, but Alpa, I have to admit, I'd never heard of Alpa. Do you want to just say something about this?
Well, they are a very technical camera. So it's one of those things that if you don't really do sort of very technical photography, like I don't know, interiors or architecture, people don't tend to use them, but they got used a lot in advertising simply because you can shoot these larger plates for background plates. So when you're shooting advertising, you always need to shoot more than you need so that they can go in various formats for different advertising boards and pages and things. So it's a very technical camera. It's very slow. It's fully manual. So that it takes a long time to use. So when you're trying to do a lot of shots in one day, you have to build in the oh god moments of, oh god, I've got to do this and I've got to do that, and it just takes time. One of the worst or the longest shots I did was of the Saturn V boosters. So if you've ever been to Houston, there's the Saturn V rocket is in a long building next to Johnson Space Center, and there's not a lot of room around it, front and rear. There's a bit of room to the sides, but when you're inside, it's quite confined. So I had my Alpa XY up on the tripod on a full extension against the wall, and I was trying to set it from the ground. So I would try and climb up some concrete steps, cock the shutter, move the focus, adjust the back, take a picture, do another one, then put them all together and see if I was centered or not. So that took a couple of hours. And then I had to do each one and then focus stack each one as well. So it means you're taking a focus from the front to the back and you stitch those together. So that's made up of 60 images, all of which I did upside down and not able to see anything on the camera at all. So it's
What about lighting? And I mean, what would you happen to work with? What was there, or did you bring? Because some of the things you're photographing were too big to light. I mean,
yeah. I mean, you can't light a space shuttle really. It's a bit difficult. But so yes, everything's available light, and then there's so many sort of technicalities involved in the way these images are made. So some of the things like gloves and helmets, those were lit, and I'd sort of build a mini studio in each location, and we'd shoot the objects, rubber stamps, all of those things. But when it comes to things like, Apollo capsules or the shuttle or the Saturn V, you have to use available light, and then you have to work out how you're going to sort of balance out all the various different lights that are hitting it. Sometimes you had purple lights with a tungsten light with a fluoro light, and so you've got this myriad of colors which are a sort of technical nightmare, but it's all part of it. You just got to get around that. There's nothing you can do, so you have to fight it a little bit.
And tell us about the post-production, because it looks like there was, taking the photos was maybe half of the job, but there was a whole post-production to be done. I mean, we can see a before and after there. Maybe you could just talk us through that.
Yeah, so that's a good example actually. So that's the Orion capsule before it has its sort of heat-proof layers put on top, and as you can see, that's in the building, the assembly building where it's built. Now the images are, taking them out of their context because the context is ugly. I'm taking them out of the context because I want you to focus solely on the object. So there's a chance for you to, really resonate with it, look at it, soak it up without any sort of encumbrance or inhibitants from anything else.
Sure.
And I have this team that I work with, a company called Inc. in London. They're phenomenal. I mean, they are absolutely phenomenal. I've worked with them for about 5-6 years now, something like that. Mm-hmm. And the dedication and effort that they put into working with me on this was, I mean, it goes above and beyond what most people should do, and their level of detail and perfection matches mine, which is hard to find. When you know what you want and you're trying to explain it to someone, it's much better to explain it to someone that gets it in the first place. So they are brilliant. They've been doing a lot on this project, and I sort of continue to work with them on commercial work as well. But that project, I think, really proved a case in point for all of us about what you need to do and the level of focus and work that needs to do. They had to build new computers to work on these.
No, my God, really?
Yeah.
So tell us about, I mean, the way you've worked with shadows, or you've added shadows, which is makes a difference. I think it looks very subtle, but it makes a big difference. That must have taken a long time.
Yeah. So we developed. We sort of worked together on how. I went to them with, this is what I want. This is how we're going to make it look. And then they worked with me on how we can sort of make that work in a slightly different way. So I won't sort of go into the full process because it's quite lengthy, but basically there was an aesthetic that we wanted, and the aesthetic had to match right across the board. So there's 250 images in the book, and I think I probably shot around 300 and something in total. Mm-hmm. So it was, it's a long, there's a way of getting the work together to look one way and then to match throughout the whole process was another level of work. It's a long time, but we're very good friends now, put it that way.
And you're still talking to them.
Okay. Yeah.
We have a picture of a rubber stamp, which I think we can pull up. That really, this just jumps out of the book and hits you between the eyes. It's a simple rubber stamp, but it has a supremely iconic name on it. There's a story here, Benedict. Do you want to share it with us? There's got to be a story behind this stamp.
Yeah, there were so many things, the artifacts in various places that I was going to the spacesuit lab to photograph one of the new Orion suits, and on the way through there's a glass cabinet, and in the glass cabinet were shuttle launch helmets, Gemini gloves, Mercury gloves, and there was this Apollo space suit helmet, so the glass bubble that they put on before launch. Mm-hmm. Inside it were all these rubber stamps, and I sort of stood there on the floor chatting to this engineer saying, is this real, or is this put on display for somebody else, or is this real? He said, no, these are all artifacts that the engineers had taken throughout the various programs and sort of built their own little mini museum. So I just asked if we could get in there and photograph it, and we did. So they had to break in. The cabinet hadn't been opened for, I think it was 7 years, and the guy that had the key had left. So I was in NASA trying to photograph these things, and it was that old adage of, failure is not an option, right? So we're going to get into this case. They eventually broke in, and we took them out, and all of those stamps, it sort of blew my mind a little bit that there I was holding these Gemini gloves, Gene Cernan's glove, last man on the moon. Mm-hmm. And I'm holding his glove, and I'm holding the stamp that was used to stamp all of Neil Armstrong's paperwork, and then, and it just kind of, you have this incredible attraction and an incredible connection with these objects. And that stamp is, it's no more than a normal rubber stamp, right? I mean, Franklin Rubber Stamp Company, they are making those sorts of stamps, well, not that anymore, but they're making stamps for anyone. You know, you can get whatever stamp you want, invoice paid, whatever. But this one was a stamp they made, just says Armstrong, but the impact that's had now, the strength of that image now is quite incredible. You have this incredible resonance with it, and you know what that's done. You know why it's there. You know, it was used to stamp all his paperwork and some of his name tags and things. So it's just an important piece, and it's something so insignificant when you look at it, but so very significant when you understand it. It's
a superb photo. I mean, I can understand you. You must have, yes, your heart must have leapt when you saw that cabinet, and I love the thought of something so simple and so functional hiding in amongst all that sophisticated technology. It's just wonderful. Another object with a foot in history is, or the history of space exploration, is this Hasselblad camera that we're going to put up. Now, I recognize that as pretty much as a camera I've used in the past, and I'm sure I certainly have. Tell us what is this camera? So
this, I mean, I'm not going to lie, I nearly cried when they brought this out. So I was photographing the new Z2 suit, which is their next generation sort of exploration suit. And the engineer who I've been working with the day before in the spacesuit lab came down just to see how I was getting on with the shoot and say hello. The people at NASA are amazing. They are so nice and so unassuming. And obviously, you know, experts in their field. I mean, they're at NASA doing what they do. So he just came down to say hello, and I've set my camera up, and I'm shooting the Z2 suit. And in the corner of my eye, I saw him put something down on the table. I could see it was silver, and then I looked over, and I said, "Is that what I think it is?" And he's like, "Yeah." So it's one of the original training Hasselblads that they used to train all the Apollo crews on, of how to take pictures before they went up. So that's been used by every single Apollo crewman.
Wow.
And they let me take the back off so I could see the ground glass with those, you know, the sort of ubiquitous little crosshairs that you see on all the lunar images, which were designed to give you depth and understand scale for the lunar surface. It was just mind-blowing. It's absolutely mind-blowing, and you know, I think that combined with the stamps just made me realize that this project is opening up before me, and in ways that I hadn't expected, and through word of mouth from the people at NASA, who are then starting to bring stuff to me, which was the kindness and generosity of those people. I've got nothing but admiration for everyone that works there. They are incredible people, and they are passionate about what they do.
Well, that's lovely to hear. And you obviously did get on. Oh, there we have.
Yeah. Like a proud sort of school kid, right? That's my camera.
Yeah. I can see.
I did have to give it back, by the way.
That's a lovely photo, and we can see a couple of your strobes in the background there. And you kind of looks like you put up. I mean, I guess you knew you were going to do a kind of cutout, so it didn't matter too much about having a perfect white background or anything.
Yeah, it kind of does in certain places. So, like, you know, if you're showing through, so there's a sort of acrylic lid there on that shot, you know, for them to look out of. So we need to put some white behind that. So knowing when it's cut out, you've got that clean background. And then also reflections is another thing that's very difficult. When you're showing something, someone said to me once, there's no reflections in the visors. And I thought, well, what's it supposed to be reflecting? It's in a white space.
Yeah.
So, you know, you need to be very careful about how those things work, because the aesthetic is one thing, but technically it needs to reflect properly as well.
Right. Well, obviously the people at NASA did like you because they let you loose on some moon rock. Which I have to say, this really surprised me. So yeah, I mean, how does that work? I mean, were you allowed to? I mean, I can't imagine you were allowed to touch it. Right?
No, you definitely can't touch it. It's in nitrogen-filled cases. So there's two parts to the lab. There's the lab where they're doing the sort of testing, the live testing of them, taking samples. They've got a beautiful book that they write everything down in, and when they send samples off, the samples are cut. They weigh the sample before, they cut the sample, they weigh the sample that's been cut, the old sample, and then the dust that's come off the cut, so that they know. And there's still a lot of samples that are missing that have gone to various institutions and then suddenly not disappeared, you know, or gone to senators or something. There was a famous story of some interns who had worked at NASA for a while. They then broke in, got through the vault. I think they blew up a small safe that had some lunar samples in, which destroyed a load of journals at the same time. They stole the samples, went away, and then tried to sell them, which is, you know, I mean, it's the most ridiculous thing to do. So they went online, they were talking to people. They thought they'd met with this collector who arranged to meet with them at a bar, I think, and then they went from the bar to a hotel, and inside the lobby of the hotel they made the exchange. But every single person that was in the lobby of that hotel, I think, was FBI, and they eventually got 8 years, because lunar rock's quite expensive to get. So yeah, they're a little bit, rightly so, touchy about it.
It's funny. I was looking at the pictures in the book of the moon rock, and then I'm thinking, you know, the 20th century has had 2 stones that, you know, to sum up the century. One of them is the moon rock. The other would be a piece of the Berlin Wall, perhaps would be an equivalent. And it's funny. I mean, they're just bits of rock, but I've spent ages looking at them in fascination. They're wonderful. And all quite
that's good. That's a good way of looking at it, actually. Yeah, I mean, I guess they're both ideas of freedom, right? I mean, the Berlin Wall coming down was setting freedom, and trying to get moon rock is that sense of we are going above and beyond our own planet and trying to explore and get greater knowledge. And moon rock sort of suggests it's a scientific research and it's for the greater good of mankind, which you could argue freedom is, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You also photographed, which I think was a moving moment for you, the last space shuttle, the Atlantis.
Yeah. Yeah, that was.
What was it like seeing that up close?
I am getting goosebumps just thinking about it. Actually, it's really bizarre how that had an effect on me. I mean, so when we go to photograph these objects, we have to go very early in the morning. We're normally there around 4 a.m. because you can't be there when the public are there, because you don't want to get in the way, and just various insurance purposes, and also it means, you know, people aren't getting in front of the shot, or you know, we're not disturbing them and they're not disturbing us.
Right.
So we walked into the Kennedy Visitor Center and walked up to a ramp, and there in front of us was Atlantis. And I remember just thinking, I couldn't quite comprehend that this was the same Atlantis that I'd seen launching and going into space and taking bits of, you know, of space station up. It just blew me away too much. And then I walked around it and saw all those wonderful marks and heat marks, and it's just incredible. And I could feel, I've never had an effect like that before, where it sort of, I was almost shaking with it's not excitement, and it's not adrenaline, and it's just being in the presence of something you admire and revere and understand it's had this ultimate purpose which it's fulfilled. You know, it's been traveling at 17,500 miles around the planet, and it's sort of been up there, what was it, 33 times, I think, for Atlantis. It was just incredible. There was its tire was there as well, actually. It shows you it's one of its landing tires, you know, and the sort of chunk of where it's hit the ground, and that's it. I think they had 1 use on the rear tires and 2 use on the front tires. Yeah, it still fills me with a sort of emotional resonance that I find incredible, that an object can do that. You know, people, I understand that you can kind of, you know, people have attachments to film stars and celebrity, and I've never had that. That's never been something that's really done it for me. But give me an object that's been designed for an incredible purpose and has fulfilled that beautifully, then I'm in full admiration of that and all the people that combine to make it.
Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah, and you also photographed a contraption called a manned maneuvering unit. MMU. What is that?
Yeah, I mean, that is that's another thing that I didn't think was going to resonate with me so much. it's so there's a famous picture. One of the most famous pictures of space was of Bruce McCandless, an astronaut called Bruce McCandless, and he's floating in space, and there's Earth below him. The image was taken from the space shuttle about, I think, 200 meters away, something like that. And that, that's an iconic shot. It's the only, he was the furthest man from Earth. There was nothing further than him. There's no humans been that far on its own, untested flight. And he helped develop the MMU. So that's MMU number 1. I think he flew MMU number 2, I think it was. And part of the reward for developing the MMU was to give him the first flight in it. And yeah, just knowing that sort of he worked on that object, and there was a really good interview with him here. He had said, most people would think that I'm there floating in space, contemplating life, and it's all nice, calm and quiet. But actually, he's got the entire crew. There you go. Wonderful. Well done. Thank you for that. He's got the entire crew from the space shuttle going, hurry up, come back, it's my turn. And then he's got ground control saying to him, you need to check everything, don't go too far, you're going too far, come back, check this, check that. So he really didn't have a moment's peace, but he had that view, and he had that experience. So yeah, pretty cool guy, and an incredible object. They later cancelled it because they basically developed maneuvers that they could use the space shuttle to capture the satellites. They had the Canadarm, and there was ways of things that they could get around not putting an astronaut at risk, and also having a bit more control over satellite recovery or getting into places that they needed to.
So, Benedict, let's turn towards the future. The space shuttle program has come to an end, but the Orion project is beginning. Could you say a little of what that's about, and what the space launch system is?
Yeah, so there was various ideas put about and started after Shuttle, because Shuttle basically became an expensive program to maintain. I think everyone that worked on that realized it was beautiful, and they wish they could carry on. They could carry on. So they developed a constellation program, which then sort of got cancelled. And then it turned into Orion, which is now Artemis. So SLS, as you mentioned, is the Space Launch System, which is basically, if you look at the space shuttle with the 2 solid rocket boosters on the side, it's like that, kind of with a Saturn V. I mean, this is really loosely speaking. It's not, the technology is very different, but it kind of looks like that, okay? Or with a sort of larger central booster on top. But it's now 2 solid rocket boosters with another rocket in the center with a payload on top.
Right.
And that is going to be, it's a bit delayed, a bit behind the schedule at the moment. But the idea for Artemis will be to go to the moon. So they want to go back to the moon. And eventually it will then also build a lunar orbiting space station, which the idea for that will be that it would help be a sort of base between Earth and the moon, where they can use it as a sort of replenishing and storage area for taking stuff to the lunar surface, to the poles, where they're going to start mining and working and building bases. Wow. And then they'll also try and use it for refueling for going to Mars, which is like the ultimate goal. Having said that, I'm not entirely sure how that will work, because I think the way that SpaceX is moving forward, it's probably going to be more likely they will be the ones that will be doing these sort of missions back and forth and refueling in space. They seem to be a little bit ahead of the game on that. But having said that, it's the capsule for Artemis is the Orion capsule, and it's, if you imagine the Apollo capsule that we looked at earlier, scaled up. So instead of 3 people, you can get, I think it was originally designed for 7, but I think you can get 5 in there is the idea. And then Boeing have the Starliner, which is a very similar looking thing, but that's aimed more at being the sort of commercial version of it. So for cargo and taking people up and down to the space station.
Right, right. There's something I should raise with you, Benedict, just to get your point of view. A few weeks ago on this In Conversation program, I had a guest who was his name is Gavin Surston, and he was the cameraman on all the David Attenborough nature programs, Blue Planet, and Planet Earth, and all that stuff. And he was saying he made the point that. To him, it was madness spending all this money on space exploration when we should be spending it on going down into the oceans, about which we know so little, about spending money on our own planet rather than rushing around space trying to land on other planets. What would be your take on that?
I think it's very, it can be a sort of destructive conversation to have, where, you know, it should be this and not that. Why not both? It should be both, okay? And I think when people start sort of comparing their own cause against another cause, it's to the death of both of the causes. It doesn't really help anyone. And you should be saying, rather than why spend money on this, you should be spending money on this. We should be spending our money on exploration because it's helping us to understand our place in the universe and what we do and how things affect us. And most money that's spent on the space program is then comes back, you know, doubly so in technology and learned technology and fabrics and materials and for your everyday life. And I agree entirely. We should be spending more money on working out what's in the ocean, how it works, and, you know, and the possibilities of how to keep it in a sustainable condition, and not only sustainable, but, you know, flourishing really. So I don't think it's a question of why just one. We should be spending on all of these things.
It's not either or. No. Yeah, fair enough. Benedict, some questions are coming in, and I should ask you some. Roger, who's a regular watcher, hi Roger, in the United States, just says film versus digital preference ?
Reference. So okay, so here's the thing on film and digital. Film is, when you're looking at a picture made up of film, you're looking at the grain of the film. So when people say that film is more realistic, it's actually the other way around. Digital gives you a real view of what it is. You know, there's no filter in there. It's a hard reality. Whereas film gives you a sort of romanticized version of what something is. So you're looking at the grain structure, which makes up the object. It's like, you know, when people used to have black mirrors, you know, that you suddenly your skin and everything looks smooth, and you look, you know, you've got this kind of lovely view of yourself. And film does that as well. It gives you a sort of much more softer and sympathetic look, and it's a lovely thing. I mean, film, you know, I shot film for the first for sort of 15 years of my work, and there are certain ways of using it, but for what I do, and looking at technical objects and wanting to see the exact textures on those, I don't want something that's taking away that texture. I want to see the texture. And I'm also making very, very large scale prints, you know, sort of 9 by 12 foot, some of these images. So they need to be a true representation of that object. Film won't give me that, but digital will.
Yeah, that's an excellent explanation. Thank you. What have we got? Oku in London says, if you could be in the place of any past, present, or future astronauts, who and which mission will it be? That's a good question.
That's a good question. I would say we touched on Bruce McCandless earlier on. You know, that's he had a pretty cool time. But one of my all-time heroes was Ed White. He did the first spacewalk on Gemini 4. And you listen to the commentary of him and the sort of the interviews afterwards. He didn't want to come back in. They basically had to order him back into the craft. He said it was the happiest and worst day of his life because, you know, he'd had this incredible experience, and how, you know, I mean, incredibly brave. You're going up in a capsule, you're opening a door, you're going out, you're connected by a tether, and you've got this little, he had this little sort of canister of air that had 2 nozzles that went out for him to move around. And he used that for a little bit, then it ran out, And then after that, he was just moving by using the tether to pull himself up across the top of the capsule. And I just think he's just such an incredible guy, and he loved that moment. He absolutely loved it, and it's what you want. It's like when you saw Tim Peake launch, and there was a one just beautiful moment where he turned back into this kind of 7-year-old kid. When it launched, he was like this. It's great, and it's what you want. He's a professional, but at the same time, you want to see the enthusiasm. And I think, Ed White, what a dude, what a dude.
Answered, beautifully answered. Thank you. Caitlin in Avon says, "Can we purchase your prints anywhere, and where can I get the book?" Well, maybe I can answer that for you, Benedict, because Caitlin, at the end of this live stream, will put up details so you can access Benedict's website. Is that the place to go, Benedict?
It's so that it's actually on the NASAproject.com. Is where you can buy the prints, and there's some litho prints on there, and then there's the books available as well. Yeah.
Great, wonderful. Chris in London, hi Chris, says, "Are there any plans to make other editions of the NASA book?"
Yes. So this is the only edition we're making like this at the moment. So we did enough. We printed 3,000 for the Kickstarter, and there will be a special edition coming out. There's only going to be 50 of those. That will be extremely special. It's made up from the original Apollo spacesuit material. So it's bound in the original beta cloth is the fabric, and it comes in a beta cloth bag that's designed using the original blueprints from the Apollo suits. And not only that, it's made by the same seamstress at ILC Dover that made the spacesuits. Yeah, it's pretty special. Yeah.
I'm not even going to ask how you managed to organise that, but
that's a lot.
My hat off to you. Very cool. Congratulations.
A lot of work.
So there's 50 of those. Well,
just 50. Yeah, we're doing just 50 of those. And they also come with the stamp that you saw earlier, the rubber stamp. It's made by. I'm getting the same stamps made up. So when you buy it, we get your name, and then we have a stamp made up with your name. We stamp the bag. So it's pretty personalised. So it's everything I could do to make it as near to as what would have been made in 1969. I've done.
Wonderful. Benedict, space tourism is now a thing. For those that can afford it, I'm guessing you'd be tempted.
It's a funny one, isn't it? I think that it's early doors. It's it's expensive. It's one of those things where you've got to be pretty wealthy to go upon the Virgin Galactic. If you really, the ultimate space tourism really is going up to the space station. So I worked with an American guy whose father had worked on Space Shuttle and also on Skylab actually, and he paid, I think it was like $30 million or something like that to train at Star City in Russia, and then went up on a Soyuz capsule and stayed on the space station for however long it was for, and then came back. Richard Garriott was his name. I don't know. I don't know whether it demeans the work. I think you have to look at it in a slightly different way, that this is now its own thing. Space tourism is something now. And I guess that's fine, as long as people understand that's what it is and they're not calling themselves. I mean, I get you're an astronaut, right? When you get to a certain level, a certain height, that means you are now an astronaut. But I think the term astronaut to me suggests someone that's a specialist in what they do. They've trained, they have a certain mindset, and I think space tourist is one thing, astronaut is something else, and I wouldn't want to confuse the two things.
Right. Well, maybe the day is not far off when we will no longer need to send human beings on long journeys into space. We'll use robots or robonauts instead. Is that? Can you see that happening? I mean, why? if we can design a robot that could do 90% of the functions that a human being can do, then you could maybe incorporate it, have 1-2 human beings and have some of the robots alongside.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what they're developing now. I mean, there's the Robonaut, that's an early one there. That's Valkyrie, which is part of the DARPA program, which is designed for, I always forget what DARPA stands for, so you have to excuse me, but it's basically they have to, the DARPA test is they have to drive a vehicle, get out of the vehicle, go through a door, walk over a step, close the door behind them, walk into an environment, turn a dial like a faucet, close the faucet, and then perform another task, and then go back and do it all again. And Boston Dynamics built a robot that they sort of then made open source. So I think there's still a long way off. You've got the Mars rover, which is, can go off and sort of do its little course, take samples. The next rover's got even more sample abilities. The thing that a lot of these engineers worked out was, obviously if you're a person, you don't need to tell them what to do. You can go, you have free thought, you can walk around, you can go and do this. So if you get a person there, they're probably going to get a lot more data in one day than the Mars rover's got in, its entire period, probably. Because you can move around and you can understand what it is that you're looking for. Whereas, the signal to send to these things is sort of 20 minutes each way, and it's delays things, and so you only have a certain lifespan for those as well. So I think exploration is a human want and need, for certain people anyway, not necessarily everyone, but and I think if you were to put someone that has the want, B, the ability and technical knowledge in somewhere or on a planet or on a wherever, then they're obviously going to give you a lot more results than you would get if you just told a robot to go and do that. Yeah, for sure. You mentioned Star City, which is, I mean, I won't call it the Russian equivalent of NASA, but you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Until I was doing research for this conversation with you tonight, I was blissfully unaware of Star City. Could you just, because you've been there, yeah.
Could you? What is it like?
Well, Star City is it is the equivalent of NASA. I mean, it's part of Roscosmos, which is Roscosmos is the Russian NASA, and NASA is the American Roscosmos. Star City is where they train the cosmonauts. It's actually it is an entire little town. They've got a hospital there, they've got school, they've got a hotel, they've got medical centres. And they have everything there. So they have centrifuges to test, various forces on the astronauts. They have a full or a working section of the space station, which is slightly different to the one they've got at Houston. So Houston's one is in the NBL, the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, which is a huge swimming pool, and it has a replica of the space station in, and they lower the astronauts in spacesuits, and then they can practice their missions underwater. So giving them a sort of zero-G-ish feel, under supervision with divers, and they can set missions and set tasks. They've got a similar thing at Roscosmos, which is actually in a round pool, but they're just quite clever. The platform lowers down into the water, so the base moves up and down, and they can practice in there. And they also have a museum there and various other little bits and pieces. And they've got another room that's got 2 Soyuz capsules in for them to practice, their day-to-day. This is what you'll be doing when you launch. Here's some scenarios. But it is very different. It's NASA's buildings are old. I mean, they're original. From the sort of they're originally an air base. At Kennedy, and so. The space program's quite old now. It's 60 odd years old, and it's all the buildings were there at the start. So the same in America as they are over there. It's just slightly different decor. So where you've got sort of white crisp of the new bits of NASA, you've got that in certain bits of Roscosmos at the launch sites and things. But where you've got the older 70s buildings from NASA, you've also got the older 70s buildings of Russia, and they have different colors. And you can see the same thing in the space station, actually. When you look at the American section of the International Space Station, it's this Kubrick white square, you know, very clinical. And then you look at the Russian section, and they've got sort of a sort of slightly pinked carpet, and these kind of greens, and yeah, very much a very different look. But it's they're all doing the same thing, you know. They're all trying to do the same thing, and they're trying to do it in their own way. Yeah, it's pretty good. But Star Cities, yeah, it's an interesting location. Yeah,
that's great. I'm going to just sneak one last question in. No, I'm going to sneak two last questions in because one just popped up. Roger again says, do you own your photography or sell rights to NASA to use?
No, so I own all the pictures.
You own pictures. Yeah. Sounds fair enough. And Raimundo in Nipomo, California says, what's the helmet behind you?
That is a Chinese MiG pilot's helmet. Yeah.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah. I've got a bit of a thing for, well, obviously, right, because I'm a bit of a geek. So I couldn't get a proper Apollo helmet, so this is the nearest I can get to a bit of space kit.
Do you wear it around the house when you're alone?
I just wear it shopping, you know. COVID. Be safe.
Yeah. Benedict, it's been just wonderful talking with you. It's been absolutely fascinating. We could go on all night, but thank you so much. We've run out of time. I wish you well with whatever future projects you've got lined up, and congratulations again on producing. So really, it's a superb book. Well done, and thank you for taking the time with us this evening. Thank you. All the best.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
So, if you're interested in space exploration and or photography, then I think, like me, you'll love this book. But just make sure you have a well-built coffee table to put it on. That's it from me today. Thank you for watching. Thanks to the Viking team who make all this possible, and I hope I'll see you next week. Until then, goodbye.